So this right here, this is the Gila Monster, and it was born to be the ultimate bikepacking hardtail. And in this video, I am going to dive into all of the details, the motivation behind getting it made, the build, the bikepacking features, and of course, how it rides. Let's do it. Now, I'm gonna be honest here, I wasn't 100% sure how I was going to share this bike with you all, or even if I would. After all, it's a custom bike, and custom bikes aren't exactly easy to, I guess, review. But after riding it for nearly 7 months, I guess I kind of realized it actually is easy because, well, there's a massive story behind this bike, more so than any other bike that I own or have owned, really. So custom bikes are, well, beyond special. And really what I want to do is share that with you all. So first off, Chris Besnia and Arlie Landry run Goodday Curiosity. And I actually highlighted their business a few years back in a video after I moved back to Gunnison here in Colorado. So Arlie is the Curiosity side, which is, well, the bike packing bags. And Chris is the Goodday side of things, building custom steel bikes and bike parts, and actually has been doing it for about 14 years now. His first ever bike was made 14 years ago called the Desert Tortoise. So Chris actually first learned how to TIG weld back in high school. After taking a few years off, he then went up to UBI and took their TIG welding frame building course, where Paul from Rock Lobster was actually his instructor. Later on, he ended up picking up Philip brazing in Salt Lake City, where he was living at the time, learning from an old school builder named Joe Scriben. So Chris actually spent a few weeks with Joe, who actually showed him the ins and outs of fillet work and lug work. So these days, Chris makes about 12 custom bikes a year and plenty of other kind of parts. But by custom, I mean fully tailored to the rider. So when Chris actually asked me what I wanted in a bike, well, I told him a hardtail that I could use for bike packing, but one that would still be fun for, everyday bike rides or day rides, more specifically kind of focused on those single track rides. So having ridden with Chris plenty, I kind of knew his style, right? He is certainly inspired by, say, those old Schwinn's with their curved top tubes, but he really puts a modern twist on that look and makes it his own. But the bike is also it is the most inspiring that you will ever put a leg over. Chris creates bikes with personality. They're fun, playful, and full of little details that you don't always notice until maybe a few rides in. At the same time, they are built to last. They are comfortable, they are durable, and just flat out beautiful. So before we talk about the plan or my initial plan of the bike, I do want to take a quick moment to let you all know that this video is supported in part by Coros, the brand behind the Coros Dura Solar GPS bike computer. So the Dura is a head unit that you might have seen in some of our videos, and for good reason. It offers an impressive 120 hours of battery life on one charge. In fact, I only had to charge mine once over a 6-month period. And if that wasn't enough, it features highly efficient solar panels on top, which make a noticeable difference in sunny conditions. With simple controls and intuitive navigation, it's perfect for bike packing or day rides of any length. So to learn a little bit more about this award-winning cycling head unit, you can click on the card in the top right corner here, or else follow the link in the description below. All right, so talking about the plan here. So I gave Chris a lot of kind of freedom with this build. I wanted him to make the bike I had in mind, but with, his twist. Chris knows me, knows how I ride, and knows what I'm going to use it for. But I also know his style of bikes, long, low, and super stable. Still, I did have a few stipulations for this build. So first off, I wanted it to be built around the 27.5-inch wheel platform with the ability to go 29er if I wanted to. I was really inspired by the viral Derive I tested a few years back, especially while I was bike packing the Queen Ransom Loop in Arizona. And that ride got me thinking about wheel size and actually how much I actually appreciate the 27.5 platform. No doubt, it's somewhat of a dying breed, especially with the chatter of 32-inch wheels coming about. So the other stipulation was the reach and a lower stack. So after riding the Pipe Dream S6 a few years back, I actually realized I really love that overall feel of the bike, long reach, low stack. It's a personal preference, sure, but it definitely gives me a better sense of the trail below me. Less material between the ground and me just makes me feel, I guess, more connected and grounded. Who knows, it could all be psychological, but it definitely does give me more confidence on the trail. And of course, I really wanted it to offer bike packing features and space for plenty of cargo. But of course, more on that soon. All right, so with that information, Chris measured up my anatomy at his shop. This is my first custom bike, and being able to basically just ride my bike 5 minutes across town to check in, get fitted, and simply bug Chris, well, it's easy. It was a pleasure. It made the decision to actually purchase a bike from him even easier, especially since he does such wonderful work. So after the fit, we briefly talked about numbers and details like the sizing of dropper posts that I wanted so that he could maximize the insertion with as little exposed post as possible. We discussed adjustable dropouts, but I decided to skip them to save money. And honestly, I'm glad I did, because I probably would have gone with a different style or geometry of bike with a single speed. We also talked about details like rear cable routing, but since I actually had just purchased a electronic drivetrain, I said no. In hindsight, I really wish I had said yes, but that's okay. We can always add them later. And then we ended up talking about bags, where I wanted them, if I wanted a full frame bag, if I needed direct mount bags. This was important because he needed to, understand where he needed to add braze-ons in the right places. He and Arlie ended up making an incredible set of bags for this bike, and I will get into those soon. So while I felt like I had a lot of input, I also really wanted to give Chris the freedom to create a bike his way. I think that's one of the beautiful things about custom bikes. You end up picking a builder for their approach and style. There's obviously so many amazing builders out there, and each has a very unique vision or take on a bike, but just seeing Chris ride his bikes and looking at his work, I knew I was in good hands. All right, so Chris used a variety of different tubes to build this frame, which is pretty fun. So the twin top tube is straight gauge 4130. It's 1 millimeter thick. The seat stays are similar, a little bit skinnier, and those are 1.2 millimeters thick. And the way he connected those two with this twin wishbone in the rear end here is truly a thing of beauty. All right, so the seat tube has a Paragon topper and a 4130 lower section for more dropper post relief. And the down tube is a Velo Spec Pro double butted tube. And then Chris spec'd a 47 millimeter head tube to fit a ZS40 EC40 headset. And then he added this really amazing custom badge. And then on the side of the head tube here, he added some TIG rod just for cable rub, which, great added touch. So naturally, he went with a 73 millimeter threaded bottom bracket, tried and true, of course. And the bike also comes with a Paragon UDH dropout, and the bike is boost space. And then Chris ended up welding all of the joints, but used the Phillip brazing technique to connect the seat tube to the twin top tube, as he likes the way it looks and actually likes the way that handles flex in that area. So for some context here on the Geo, the frame was built around a 140 millimeter fork with 27.5 by 2.6 inch wheels, but it does clear up to 29 by 2.4 inch rubber. All right, so the bike comes with a 470 millimeter reach and about a 615 millimeter stack, give or take a few millimeters there, which is slightly more than I wanted, but after riding it, I think Chris nailed it. If anything, he told me I could chop off some of the head tube down to kind of lower that stack a little bit, but he kept it on purpose just in case I liked it. And I kind of do. And of course, paired with only 10 millimeter stack spacer and then the Industry 9 stem, which is a -6 position, it kind of replicates a real stack measurement on the Pipe Dream S6, or at least pretty closely. All right, so the chainstays come in at 435 millimeters. You got a front center of 805 millimeters, making the full wheelbase around 1,240 millimeters. So yeah, definitely not your typical hardtail, but custom is not typical, right? It's got a big front center, so much so that I often forget that I'm actually on a hardtail. I feel like I'm riding my full suspension trail bike sometimes, and that's not a bad thing. it is incredibly inspiring for a hardtail. So the 64-degree head tube angle plays a big role in that, of course. And to balance out that long front end, Chris gave it a 75-degree seat tube angle to kind of keep that riding position supported. So the bike has a 57mm bottom bracket drop, which is low, but pretty standard for Chris's bikes. All right, so custom bikes should really offer something that you can't find on the market, especially in a size that actually kind of fits you, right? So I've voiced my concern before about this, but the bike industry has a fit problem. So I'm 5'9.5" or just shy of 177 centimeters. And after a quick Google search, I found that, well, yeah, the most common height around in the United States, Canada, the UK, is between 5'9" and 5'10", which means there should be plenty of bikes that fit the average human, right? Instead, 9 times out of 10, I fall between a medium and a large, stuck making kind of an annoying decision. It's not the end of the world, but I feel like it gets old. And there's not enough companies out there making extra mediums, but those that are, thank you for doing that. All right, so right away, when I got on this bike, I felt at home. The fit was, well, it was spot on. Even with the long front end, I never actually felt like it was cumbersome, at least on the 27.5-inch wheel. In fact, I actually really liked that 27.5-inch wheel. It kind of complemented the length of the bike. It kind of gave me, I guess, quicker turning radius on twisty trails, and essentially kind of just shortened the overall feel of the bike. So I first brought it to Arizona. I pedaled the Fool's Loop, and even on long stretches of dirt roads, it didn't feel sluggish at all. Now the bottom bracket was very low, and that is how Chris kind of designs his bikes. If anything, I would have opted for maybe some shorter cranks from the 165 that are on the bike to maybe 160. But otherwise, I absolutely loved the all-day ride quality. And this thing rips on descents, whether it's dirt roads or technical single track like, say, the Black Canyon Trail. And of course, in true kind of tinkering fashion, I ended up swapping the drivetrain and wheels to the new Shimano bits that launched a few months back, since I needed a bike packing bike to throw that stuff on to review. And if you want to check that review out, it is linked in the description below. So despite only clearing a 29 by 2.4 inch rear tire, I think I could have actually squeezed in maybe something a little bit bigger, but obviously it is nice to have some mud clearance. Still, I was really impressed with the overall ride quality on dirt roads and 2-track. It certainly felt a touch more efficient, and it still was extremely stable. And with that larger wheel, that bottom bracket was raised ever so slightly, which I think actually became the perfect height for this bike, paired with the 165mm crank arms. Plus, loaded down, the frame felt extremely comfortable, and I actually think the added flex of that 29er wheel kind of gives it a little bit more comfort too. So I noticed this even more so when I actually swapped the rear wheel back to the 27.5, but kept the 29er, the setup that you're looking at right now. So I've ridden mixed setups before, but I never actually truly loved them. But over the past, I guess, week or so, I've been testing this setup, and I've been pleasantly surprised by its capability. Yeah, it's downright playful, giving me that snappy turning ability out back with that rollover speed of a 29er up front. Honestly, it might actually be the most inspiring hardtail setup that I've ridden to date. The only downside is that it kind of slackens that head tube angle to 63.3 degrees roughly. And then that seat tube angle kind of shifts a little bit as well, putting me a little bit more on that rear wheel. So on kind of longer or steeper climbs, sometimes it felt like my weight wasn't necessarily over the middle of the bike. And it definitely made that wheelbase a little bit longer as well. So in the end here, this bike has given me a lot of perspective. Riding this thing has kind of made me think maybe I should actually be sizing up to a larger frame when making that tough decision between the medium and the large. I tend to get caught up in chasing efficiency all the time. It's the old racer in me. But at the root of my style of riding, I've always been a really good climber, but where I've kind of lacked confidence is descending. So longer, lower, slacker bikes like the Gila Monster give me that confidence that I need. Even better, a long hardtail can still climb pretty well. And well, this one strikes a really wonderful balance. It's efficient enough for, all day riding, but when the trail tilts down, it puts a huge grin on my face. Now, one of the big highlights of this bike is, well, the bike packing capacity. I never had an easier time packing a bike. And this probably goes back to sizing of bikes, because most of the bikes I ride, they simply don't optimize storage space. But Chris clearly did here. The massive front triangle makes a huge difference thanks to that bucket bottom bend in the down tube, and then of course that curved twin top tube up top. Sure, it does take away a little bit of standover clearance, but honestly, I don't really care about standover anyways. Chris ended up adding on braze-ons both on the top tube and on the bolt-on frame bag. And what makes it unique is that there are actually two different frame bags here. So the top is basically a half frame bag, and it separates from the lower portion. So this basically gives me the opportunity to run just a top bag with, say, maybe 2 water bottles at the bottom of the triangle for, say, day rides or shorter trips. Then I can always add in that bottom bag when I need a little bit more capacity. And Arlie really did a fantastic job with the design here. All of the little details like this saguaro cactus and the Gila monster up here. The artwork it's fantastic and just truly the icing on the cake. I love the convertible style bags. All right, so the bike also comes with rear rack mounts, and I've used those plenty. Chris actually did a really great job of placing them super low near the dropout. So I've grown really annoyed with, I guess, the variation of mount or rack locations across different frames. I feel like the lower the mount, the better in my opinion. Really simple as that. And the upper rack mounts are positioned on the kind of twin top tube portion of the wishbone stay. Great location. Bottom line, this bike just simply gives me more packing options than I'm used to. On most bikes, I'm really struggling to find space, especially the medium bikes that I test. But on this one, I find myself with extra space, and that's certainly pretty refreshing. All right, so I think this is a good time to talk about the inspiration behind the color and the name, which actually came together at the very end of the build. So Chris actually originally named the bike something else, but it really didn't resonate with me. So while we were kind of talking about the colorway, which was inspired by Arizona desert sunsets, I thought about one of the coolest little reptiles I've seen in Arizona, the Gila monster. So these large lizards I've come across many times. So I know that's rare since, well, they're pretty elusive, but I've been lucky enough to actually see quite a few over the years bike packing in Arizona. All right, so even though Chris and I both live here in Gunnison, we both gravitated towards an Arizona name. It felt like a tribute to the escape we take each winter when we need a break from the deep freeze of one of the coldest spots in the country. All right, so eventually we also landed on bronze and purple as the two main colors, with orange as an accent, and then Chris went to work powder coating the bike right in his shop, which I would say is a very special little perk that he offers, especially compared to some other frame builders. From there, I picked out some really matchy parts to tie it all together. Speaking of parts, I will be actually publishing a separate video on the full build of this bike. I actually had my buddy Eric build the bike up for me in my garage. I recorded him doing all the little fine details, and I think it will be a pretty fun and kind of different video to share. It's definitely a dream build of sorts, but one that I actually paid for mostly myself, aside from the Industry 9 wheels and stem. Industry 9 sent those over for review when they launched the Hydra 2 a few months back, which you can check out in the description below. So I don't have many gripes on this build, but I should mention I have had some weird nuances, consistency issues, I guess, with the SRAM XX transmission. It's working fine now, but the setup felt a little bit, I guess, on the trickier side of things with the custom frame. And overall, I've been kind of underwhelmed by the performance, the shifting speed, crispness, and the big one, consistency. Honestly, the GX transmission driver is kind of one of the better drivetrains I've used over the past 2 years. So it feels odd that the XX hasn't delivered the consistency that you would expect at the higher price point. Outside of all of that, I've actually been really enjoying the older Specialized Purgatory tires on this bike, at least the 27.5 tire. I've got a Forecaster up front, great tire as well, but I've ridden this bike more with the Purgatory, and I think this is the older Purgatory. It's a great everyday tire. It's fast enough on the rolling side of things, solid volume at 2.6 inches, and plenty of grip on loose over hard, which is what I find myself on most of the time. The SRAM Code Stealth brakes here have also been really solid. They've given me reliable stopping power, which isn't something that I can say about another set of the exact same brakes on a different bike, but maybe that was just Eric bleeding the brakes properly. So at first I had the Fox 36 27.5 fork at 160 millimeter, and I swapped that to a 140 millimeter air shaft. It is on the heavier side, but really it complemented the build nicely, a little bit stiffer front end, and it was really a joy to ride once I actually dialed it in. So later I ended up swapping the 29er Fox 36 SL in the 140 millimeter category, and that's been exceptional as well, and I'm still running it now, but I do plan on moving it to another bike soon for a proper long-term test. A few other bits. I got a Raceface Era bar. This was the last component on the bike. I just found a bronze bar that matched, and I was like, all right, let's go for it. Overall, between the silver, bronze, and purple accents, and then Chris's amazing powder coat, I think the bike really came alive here. So while this is somewhat of a review, at the same time, it's not, right? It's hard to actually review a custom bike that can't really be replicated, or really shouldn't be replicated, right? What I can say is that Chris did a really fantastic job with the attention to detail. His bikes are incredibly thoughtful, beautifully built, and well, full of character. And if anything, this bike kind of shows what is possible with a hardtail, whether that's a week-long bike packing trip or simply a quick hour spin out of the house. On a deeper level, this bike has certainly made me a more confident rider. Of course, in terms of handling, but really how relaxed I feel when riding through, say, rough, chunky terrain. And I know the bike can handle it, right? And when it comes to packing for trips, I don't lose sleep trying to figure out where all my stuff is gonna go. And for a custom bike, I think that's exactly the end goal. A bike that gives you the confidence and ability that you might not find on a bike with, say, stock geometry. Plus, you get to support a small business, and in this case, a locally owned small business. All right, so if you are looking for a bike like this, well, Chris's bikes start at 2,800 USD with that twin top tube, the one I have here, starting at 3,000 USD, and he can build you up a complete bike with all of the components that you want, or just send you a frame. So, the Gila Monster from Goodday Curiosity. Share your thoughts below, and if you already own a custom bike or want one, please let me know why in the comments section. As always, thank you all so much for watching, and if you like what you saw in this video and want to see more like it, please hit that subscribe button and notification bell. And if you want to help support everything on this YouTube channel at BIKEPACKING.com, you can do so by joining the Bikepacking Collective. The collective offers a lot of awesome perks, including industry discounts, monthly giveaways, the twice-yearly bikepacking journal, and of course the all-new base camp. So to learn a little bit more about the Bikepacking Collective, you can click on the card in the top right corner, or else follow the link in the description below. As always, thanks so much for watching, and until next time, paddle further.